Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today we're going to be looking at the rhetoric of defining atheism as a lack of belief in God. Technically, they will always include or gods, but that's irrelevant to the moment. I first encountered this about 6 months ago, which I will admit is a bit late because Antony Flew proposed this new definition in 1976, and it apparently caught on like wildfire since, especially online. And I was amazed when I first met it, because I can't imagine why anyone would voluntarily take on such a rhetorically weak position. I mean, I do get that there are profoundly lazy people who just don't want to be bothered arguing for their beliefs, and that in the aftermath of the Enlightenment, they're not going to want to admit that they just believe it by faith. But still, just consider what this new definition means. If atheism is lacking a belief in God, that means it is simply the non-existence of a property. Now, non-existence has to be the same in all cases. Only things that exist can be distinguished, because only things that exist can have properties which can be used to distinguish them. You cannot distinguish Ewoks from Wookiees, because neither exists. You can distinguish the idea of Ewoks from the idea of Wookiees, because both ideas exist. But the lack of belief atheist is explicitly denying that atheism is an idea. He claims that atheism is a pure non-existence, which means that anything which lacks a belief in God is an atheist. Vegetables, bricks, cow manure. The way that belief in God doesn't exist in them can't not exist any differently than it doesn't exist in the atheist. That's what non-existence means. Non-existence has no properties. Now, I know that atheists will cheat and claim that it's different in a thing which is capable of believing in God, but this is unsupportable on two levels. First, as we already talked about, they can't ascribe any property to it that can distinguish it. Where something doesn't exist is not a property of it. It's only a property of that thing which does exist. And all that's saying is that in other respects besides lacking a belief in God, an atheist is different from a pile of cow manure. And secondly, and perhaps more importantly, they can't prove that their mind, or brain as they would probably prefer, is actually capable of believing in God. The only way they could prove that is by believing in God. Having believed in God in the past doesn't prove it, because they could have suffered brain damage. And it doesn't have to be from physical trauma. People can turn schizophrenic without physical trauma to their brains. People can go blind without physical trauma to their brains. There is absolutely no way that they can prove that this isn't simply a defect in their brains. If it was a positive belief, for which they had evidence, it would be a different story. Then they could provide the evidence. I can prove to you a billion solar mass black hole doesn't exist in my driveway, and thus that my disbelief in it, my lack of belief in it, is not merely a cognitive defect on my part. They've got nothing. Literally, that's their claim. And if you look at the rhetoric of it, it's just abysmal for their side, since everyone with a non-functioning brain is definitionally an atheist. Why would an atheist want to be able to say, intelligent people can be Christians, average people can be Christians, even partial idiots can be Christians, but complete idiots are all atheists? Woohoo? And if you think that's going too far, don't forget that one of the supposed consequences of this definition is that atheism is the default position. Everyone is born an atheist. And perhaps this is true in the same sense that everyone is born lacking a belief that the planets orbit the sun in elliptical orbits, or that natural selection was the origin of species, or that they have grandparents. In fact, people are born lacking virtually all beliefs that they will later come to hold. This supposed benefit of this definition means that an atheist knows no more about the world than a newborn child. In this respect, at least. How does this seem like a benefit to anyone? Do you think I was born yesterday? Usually means, do you take me for a fool? Not, do you think I'm the smartest, most rational person around? They have literally taken a common insult and started taking it as a compliment. Or consider the nature of persuasion. To convert someone, a Christian needs to persuade him that Christianity is an accurate reflection of reality. This may be by discursive reasoning or other reasoning, such as showing the evidence of a life of joy and heroic virtue. There are lots of effective means, but Ultimately, if they succeed, they must engage the full person, seeming both true and good. Literally nothing that an atheist says would be as effective in turning somebody else into an atheist as a full frontal lobotomy. 25 strokes to the head with a tire iron by a strong man will turn anyone into an atheist. Guaranteed! Come be an atheist. There is literally nothing about this definition which is rhetorically strong. And you can see this all over the internet, where atheists sound like cheap children's toys from 30 years ago, where you pull the string in their back and they say the same 3 things, over and over. Where's your evidence? That's not evidence. You don't have any evidence. Of course, the reason they use it is that none of them take this idea very seriously. They're not thinkers, so they don't really regard this idea as a description of reality to be fit in with the other descriptions of reality they have. It's a rhetorical gambit, used to establish a position and then discarded. And lack of belief usually goes with other unexamined principles. It's often paired with the assume it doesn't exist until proven otherwise principle. This isn't a real principle, of course. No one applies this to holes in the ground. I will assume there are no animals with teeth in this hole until I find evidence to the contrary. And please don't give me your Badger of the Gaps theory. Just because you can't explain why this hole is here now doesn't mean science won't eventually be able to explain it without recourse to a badger. And if you make that joke to a lack of belief atheist, they won't get it. They treat God as something special, exempt from all normal rules of evidence. Which is ironic, actually, since they will call it special pleading if you point out that the uncreated creator of all that is must have a different nature than created things. Anyway, if you want to test this for yourself, or if you just want to get rid of a lack of belief atheist because, well, let's be honest, they're probably not being honest, and no fruitful discussion can take place until you sort out the wheat from the chaff. That is, people sincerely interested in discussion from those who just want a polemic fight. The simplest method is to ask them to prove something which they do believe in. I don't mean something abstract, like a scientific hypothesis. Anything which modern people can defer to experts, they almost certainly will. It's ironic that they'll also pat themselves on the back for thinking for themselves, but whatever. Ask them to prove something very simple and personal, like that they can competently evaluate evidence, or that they're honest in the discussion. I know it has an overtone of being rude to question somebody's honesty, but in this case, it's only being respectful of their stated beliefs. If you should never believe in the existence of anything without evidence, then they should provide you evidence that they're honestly taking part in the discussion. That's what their principle is. Yes, their principle, if taken seriously, would lead to a complete breakdown in social interaction. Well, yes, but why isn't that evidence that their principle is wrong? A variant on this I've also used is asking if they have any evidence that reading what they write isn't a waste of time. It only makes sense to invest time into listening to them if one might reasonably expect some value in what they say. But there being value in what they say is a positive claim, and therefore the burden of proof, according to most lack of belief atheists, is on the person making the claim. So, according to them, it's their job to prove this. Such atheists will always object, of course, because the one thing they're not is consistent. Assuming you're not talking to an outright troll, some will basically ask you to take what they say on blind faith, but most will present you with what amounts to a modified form of Pascal's wager. And I don't mean Pascal's version of it, which is, though not perfect, complex and subtle. I mean the really stupid version of it that you hear fundamentalists say. And, well, this shouldn't be a surprise. So many atheists today are just fundamentalists whose holy book is a biology textbook. Well, more commonly the oral tradition which originated around it. Fundamentalists don't seem to read the Bible very much either. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.